So, I recently picked up a game that I've had mixed feelings about since the initial announcement, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm a huge Marvel fanboy. And after playing through the campaign of this game for the past couple of days, my opinion is still mixed. My name is Joe. Welcome to Quiggles Gaming. Let's talk about Marvel's Avengers. Given how amazing Marvel's Spider-Man for PS4 was, I really wanted to fall in love with this game. Despite my initial reactions, I really wanted it to catch me off guard. And it didn't. For those of you that don't know, Marvel's Avengers is described as an action role-playing brawler game developed by Crystal Dynamics and published by Square Enix. Crystal Dynamics you may know for having developed the Tomb Raider series since around 2006, and Square Enix, well, if you've ever played a Final Fantasy game, then you know who Square Enix are. I want to kick off with what is probably my biggest issue with Marvel's Avengers, and that is the genre. It's an action role-playing brawler game, which I think, if I'm honest, is where it really lets itself down. Let's start with the action part of the game. As an action game, it's got some really cool sequences and platforming, kind of similar to what you see in Tomb Raider or Uncharted, but the big difference for me is that for those games, it's a big part of the gameplay and kind of a key staple of the games. But for Avengers, that's not really the case, and as a result, it ends up being kind of half-baked. One of the unique selling points of this game is the ability to choose which Avenger you're doing each mission as, which sounds great in theory, but in reality, what you end up with is missions that are trying to incorporate different elements of each character's gameplay styles, rather than just focusing on one character. So instead of getting a really cool bespoke platforming mission for someone like Black Widow, what you end up getting is a tiny section of platforming incorporated into the level, which becomes completely irrelevant if you're playing as someone like Iron Man because, well, you know, he can fly. The missions that really stood out to me were the intro missions for each character. Because you were forced to play as them, it meant that the whole level and the whole design of the gameplay was to showcase what that character could do. And what you ended up with was a really unique character experience. And I think they should have added more of those. Let's move on to the role-playing element. This is probably the bit I dislike the most, and it's not the first game I've had this issue with. The leveling system to me feels akin to the latest Assassin's Creed games like Origins or Odyssey, which, while I enjoyed both of those games, I really didn't like the fact there were certain areas of the world that I couldn't access, not because I couldn't go there, but because the enemies there had a higher number above their heads. A lot of games are doing that these days, and to me it just feels like a really lazy way of stopping you from going to that area because they don't want you to go there for the story yet. But instead of giving you a gameplay reason like a bridge is closed or you don't have the transportation, instead they just make the enemies harder and it means you can't go there. And it just feels lazy. And it definitely feels like that's the case for Marvel's Avengers too. I like being able to upgrade abilities and choose what kind of playstyle I want for each individual character, but I don't want to worry about what numbers above a bad guy's head. Couple that with the fact that when you get a new hero, they start at level 1. So if you're like me and you like to play through the campaign first and then do the side missions, it basically makes it impossible to use that new hero because your current ones are so much stronger than them. Another part of the game that makes me genuinely quite annoyed is that when you get new equipment and equip that new equipment, your character looks exactly the same. Even playing Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy 8, if you get a new sword and equip that new sword, you're holding that new sword. Like, why? In reality, the reason is because of the skin system. They want you to buy new skins and they want you to use different skins, and trying to design that equipment so that it works with all those skins is a nightmare, quite frankly. So I get it, I don't like it. Finally, let's move on to what I think is the strongest part of the game, and that is the brawler aspect. As a button mashing brawler, this game works. Is it perfect? Of course it isn't, but I've never found a game that is. But standing on the ground fighting waves of enemies as Cap, while Iron Man flies through the sky and blasts things with his repulsors, and then you've got Hulk doing what Hulk does best, smash. It's really cool, and that's where it is really cool to be able to pick your team of Avengers and play as whichever Avenger you want to be. More of this, like I say, it's got some issues. The targeting system in particular is really frustrating because when you defeat the enemy you're fighting, it doesn't auto snap to the next closest enemy. You have to press the button to target them again. And sometimes when you press the button to target, instead of it targeting the enemy you're looking at, it targets an enemy over there. But, you know, all told, the combat system's pretty fluid, and that's where it's awesome to be a different Avenger and use their intrinsic abilities to do the things that the Avengers do. Overall, in my opinion, the biggest problem with Avengers is the fact that it doesn't really know what it wants to be. So instead of focusing in and zoning in on one thing it wants to do really, really well, it tries to do a bunch of different things, and all those things end up being I enjoy playing through it despite its flaws, and given the amount of DLC it's got coming, it's got some solid replayability. I just wish it had focused a little bit more. Before I go, I'm one of those people who only plays games with subtitles on, and when you enable subtitles on Marvel's Avengers, it does let you know that there will be some closed captioning in the cutscenes. Now, I'm hard of hearing and a bunch of my family have bad ears, so I've seen a lot of subtitles and closed captioning in my life, and in my experience, closed captioning tends to be when there is a audio cue that isn't visible on screen. So, for example, if someone knocks on the door, it will say, "There's a sudden knock at the door," or something like that, and not describe things that we can literally see happening on screen. So there's bits in Avengers where it's like, Kamala looks wistfully into the distance, contemplating what has just happened. I don't need you to tell me that. I've got eyes. If I can't see what is happening on screen, then putting it in the closed captions isn't going to help me. It would have been fine if they'd have chosen to make it a stylistic choice and have it pop up in a comic book caption box. But instead, it's just weird, and it comes across as someone has done these closed captions who has literally never seen closed captions before. On the note of subtitles, there are some incredible moments where the subtitles that are on screen just don't match up with what's being said, like even a little bit. I'm not going to put them here because the ones that I just lost it at are all right near the end of the game, and I don't want this review to be too spoiler filled, so just be ready, they're pretty great. And that's my talk about Avengers. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought, or come stop by my Twitch chat. I stream every Monday and Thursday, link in the description below. No. Yes. Yes.